Hi Tim, welcome to Cloud Pandit. So in this Azure Data Factory Master Program video series, so in today's session we will talk about what is integration runtime and the different types of integration runtime and what are the use cases of each integration runtime we will discuss in detail. Let's get started very quickly. So what is integration runtime? Remember, suppose if you look at any code, any job, if you consider to run that particular job, we need some computers, we need some computational power, we need some laptops. You just think of computers or laptops, right? So what we do, so we use these laptops or computers are nothing but as servers, or you can call it as a nodes. These compute servers we need in order to run our jobs. So Azure Data Factory is mainly used for data integration and orchestration, meaning connecting to the various source system, bringing the data and loading into the target systems, right? Uh, like read data from on-premise SQL server, load it into data lake storage. Similarly, you read data from the Azure SQL database, load it into SQL data warehouse, and many things you will do. So who is going to back end who is the main responsible component or the responsible person who is doing this particular ingestion from SQL database to SQL data warehouse, or on-premise SQL server to Azure SQL database, or on-premise file system to data lake storage, and to who's doing all these things in the back end is integration runtime is doing all of these things. Okay, so integration runtime in Azure Data Factory are a compute infrastructures, meaning computational power computers, which are used to provide data integration capabilities across various environments and data sources. Meaning, to move the data between the various environments means there are some sources which are publicly accessible, meaning like directly Azure Data Factory can connect, but some of the source systems will be there in a private network. Okay, how we will have a compound wall and the security for that particular compound wall before you enter into your office, right? So there is a initial entrance gate, there is a check. Similarly, there are some source systems which is deployed inside the virtual network, which is a one more layer of protection for our resources. Now, if we have such type of resources where which are deployed inside the virtual network, to connect to such type of resources we need a separate integration runtime. So that's where the different types of integration runtimes comes into the picture, so I'll explain to you. But this particular compute infrastructure, we can able to use the resources which are there in the various environments, like in the publicly accessible, privately accessible, all the different data sources we can able to access it using these integration runtime. They facilitate seamless data movement and transformation between on-premise and cloud data stores, enabling efficient ETL process. Okay, so there is a flexible, limitless data movement and transformations we can able to do from the on-premise to cloud, or on-premise to on-premise, or cloud to cloud we can able to do. And enabling efficient ETL process means we can also kick off the ETL jobs. Remember, the ETL jobs are not running within the integration runtime. Integration runtime will kick off the job, so that particular ETL jobs, if you are using data flows, those jobs will run in the Spark cluster. So those are more efficient. But integration runtime is the trigger point which basically dispatch the jobs on the Spark. Okay, that particular things will be done by integration runtime. Let's see. There are three main types of integration runtimes in Azure Data Factory: Azure Integration Runtime, Self-Hosted Integration Runtime, Azure SQL Server Integration Service Integration Runtime. It is also known as a shortcut SSIS Integration Runtime. Let's discuss each of these things in detail. Okay, so Azure Integration Runtime, Self-Hosted, Azure SSIS Integration Runtime. Use cases of the integration runtimes, if you see, first let me explain to you overall, then we will go there further. Okay, so if you look at here, right, so this is on premise, this is a on premise. When you say on premise, which is a separate outside of the cloud. Okay, to access any services which are in the on-premise, right? So like it can be a SQL server, it can be any Oracle, it can be any file systems, it can be uh, any other databases which you have in the on-premise. If you want to connect to any of these things, we need a self-hosted IR, because on-premise is not a cloud, right? It is outside of the cloud. So to connect to the on-premise means our own environment where we are maintaining the servers, we are hosting the SQL server databases, all those things in our organization or in our home. To connect to such type of servers and all, we need a special integration runtime called self-hosted integration runtime. Let's say in my computer I have a data, I have installed SQL server. In that SQL server I have a data. To take that particular data, we need self-hosted integration runtime, the first use case. The second use case is within the Azure. Okay, we have a storage account, we have Azure SQL DB, we have a so Synapse, right? These three. But let's say these three are within the VNet. VNet means virtual network. So this is also, even though it is in the cloud, there is extra layer of protection. ADF cannot connect directly. So in these cases also, we need a self-hosted integration runtime. Okay, we need a self-hosted integration runtime. You can see the computer symbols, right? So but this is a symbol for self-hosted IR. Okay, this is a symbol for the self-hosted IR. Next. Okay, next, if you see these services are directly available in the cloud. See, there is nothing restricted here. So such type of things we can directly access using the Azure integration runtime. So you need to understand our total three we discussed. Azure integration runtime we can able to use if we have to connect to the cloud services. If you want to connect to the cloud services, you can use the Azure integration runtime. But if you want to connect to the on-premise, this one, you need to use the self-hosted IR. Similarly, if you have a Azure services which are deployed inside the virtual network, for those things also we need to use the self-hosted IR. So the third and final thing you need to understand, if we have a SSIS packages which are there in the Azure SQL DB, which is deployed inside the VNet virtual network, so in that case we can use the Azure SSIS integration runtime. See, only blindly you can remember, if you want to execute any SSIS packages, whether it is in the on-premise, whether it is in the cloud, we use only Azure SSIS integration runtime. Within the SSIS integration runtime, if it is in the on-premise, we use the self-hosted IRs. If the things are there in the cloud, we use the Azure IR. Okay, meaning the compute will be maintained by the Microsoft. So remember, okay. So this is completely used only if we have to execute any SSIS packages. But self-hosted IR and Azure IR you can use for almost all the requirements uh, based on the use case. If we have a on-premise or service within the VNet, we use self-hosted IR. If we have a service in the cloud directly without VNet, we can use the Azure integration runtime. Okay, let's move on. What is Azure Integration Runtime? If you say Azure Integration Runtime is managed by Microsoft, okay, we are not worrying about anything. By default, Azure Integration Runtime will be available within the Azure Data Factory. It is managed by Microsoft. All the patching, scaling, maintenance of the underlying infrastructure. What is underlying infrastructure in a computer? What all things will be there? There is a memory, there is a disk, there is a core, okay, security patching. So all those things are the infrastructures which we will be maintaining. So for those infrastructures should be keep on updating as per the latest software updates, because otherwise these will be attacked by the hackers, right? So that's why all the patching, scaling, maintenance of the underlying infrastructure is taken care of by the Microsoft. So the IR can only access data stores and services in the public network. Public network means the services which are directly available in the cloud without VNet, right? So those only Azure IR can able to access. Use cases, if you see, Azure IR is designed for data movement and transformations between different Azure services and regions, between the only Azure services and between the two different regions within the Azure. If you want to do, you can able to use the Azure IR. Copying data from Azure SQL database to data lake storage. Azure SQL database is a cloud, data lake is a cloud. So in this case, moving data between Azure Blob Storage and Azure SQL Data Warehouse. Yes, these are also directly available in the cloud. So to move the data from Blob to SQL Data Warehouse, we can use the Azure Integration Runtime. Transforming data using the Azure Databricks and loading it into the Azure Synapse Analytics. See, data, sorry, if you look at this, right, the transforming data using Azure Databricks, meaning what happens is, if you look at here, so Databricks is a Azure service to dispatch the jobs or to trigger the jobs in the Databricks. We can just use the Azure integration runtime because Databricks is also within the Azure, which is not inside the VNet. If you deploy Databricks inside the VNet, again we need a self-hosted IR. Remember, okay? Next, let's quickly talk about self-hosted integration runtime. So self-hosted integration runtime use infrastructure hardware managed by you. So we need to install it. We need to maintain the infrastructure. We need to choose. So in which mission we need to install the self-hosted IR, what size of the computer we need, what is the memory, what is the cores. Okay, so when the like manually we need to just do this patching, all those things. Whenever we need more compute, we need to scale it. So that's why self-hosted IR use the infrastructure hardware managed by you. You all need to address all the patching, scaling, maintenance. The IR can access resources in both public and private networks. Okay, meaning self-hosted IR is used to establish connectivity between Azure Data Factory and the on-premise data stores, or it can be the services within the VNet. It allows data movement between on-premise databases, files, and other sources to the Azure-based data source. Extracting data from on-premise SQL Server and loading it into the Azure Cosmos DB. See, on-premise SQL Server to Azure Cosmos DB, meaning you are moving data from on-premise to cloud data movement. When you are moving the data, when you are ingesting the data, we can use the self-hosted IR. Copying data from on-premise file system to Azure SQL database, transforming and aggregating data from on-premise Oracle database before loading it into the data lake storage. So in all these use cases, we can use the self-hosted IR. But as I mentioned, self-hosted IR we can use when you want to move data from cloud to cloud, cloud to on-premise, on-premise to cloud, on-premise to on-premise. All the everywhere you can use the self-hosted IR. But why we need Azure IR? The only thing is, if you're moving data within the cloud, then we don't require self-hosted IR because Azure is maintaining the self-host. Azure is maintaining the Azure integration runtime. Microsoft is maintaining Azure integration runtime. What is the use of it? Because we can reduce our headache, right? Because they are maintaining completely the integration runtime, scaling, patching, right? The deployments, underlying issues and all, they will take care. So that headache will not be there for us. That's why we basically takes the services which are maintained by them if it is available. If it is not available, in the exceptional cases, if something is not directly supported or maintained by them, we need to go for our own maintained infrastructure, that is self-hosted IR and all. Okay, as the Azure IR not supports the on-premise things, so in that cases we need to install the self-hosted IR and we need to maintain the infrastructure, scaling, patching, etc. Okay, so in one line, I'm telling you, self-hosted IR is used mainly to move data from on-premise to cloud or to move data from services which are deployed inside the VNet to the virtual network to the cloud. Azure IR will be used only to move data from public to public, that is cloud to cloud data movement. Okay. Final one, SSIS integration runtime. Okay, Azure SSIS integration runtimes are a virtual missions. These are a group of missions. It's not a single mission. Remember, are VMs running the SSIS engine. It runs the SSIS engine, which allows you to natively execute SSIS packages. Okay, it basically helps to execute your SSIS packages. They are managed by the Microsoft. As a result, all the patching, scaling, maintenance is taken care of, and the IR can access resources in both public and private network, because within the SSIS IR we can choose the, we need a self-hosted IR or Azure IR kind of thing. Okay, that's why. So this can able to access the resources both in the public and private network. Use cases, if you see, it is used to migrate on-premise SSIS packages, like lift and shift existing on-premise SSIS packages to the Azure extensively without rework. Okay. Like a cloud data integration, seamlessly we can move and transform the data between the cloud and on-premise sources and destinations using the SSIS integration runtime. And it is a scalable ETL job, right? Basically it executes the SSIS packages at scale for large data processing tasks. Okay. Yeah, so for large data processing, we can able to use this particular SSIS integration runtime to execute the SSIS packages. Okay, that's all, team. So let's quickly discuss summary questions. What is the primary purpose of Azure integration runtime in Azure Data Factory? So the Azure integration runtime, the primary purpose is data movement and transformation. The option C is correct. Which type of integration runtime is used to establish connectivity between Azure Data Factory and on-premise data sources? Whenever on-premise is involved, you can blindly say self-hosted integration runtime. The answer B is correct. Which integration runtime is used for data movement and transformation between different Azure services? Yes, between different Azure services means blindly we can say Azure integration runtime. Option A is correct. In a hybrid data scenario where data resides both on-premise and in the cloud, which integration runtime type would use? So whenever, whether you have a cloud or not, but if it is on-premise is involved means we must have to go for the self-hosted IR. So what is this fourth question explains is, let's say you have data in the on-premise SQL server, we have data in the Azure SQL database which is in the cloud. Okay, now you want to bring data from Azure SQL database, on-premise SQL server, both of them into the ADLS, data lake or data warehouse, right? So here on-premise is involved, cloud is involved to ingest data into the again cloud in the different resource or different storage system. In that case, we must have to go for the self-hosted integration runtime. Remember, okay? The answer B is correct because it supports all the environments. What does the self-hosted integration runtime allows you to do? So as you know, it basically helps to connect to the on-premise data sources to Azure. It helps to connect the on-premise data sources to Azure so that we can move the data from the, so the option C is correct, to move the data from the on-premise to the cloud. What is the primary benefit of using Azure integration runtime for running a SSIS packages in Azure? Reduce storage cost, enhance web application performance, no scalability for large data processing tasks. The answer C is correct. It is basically for scalability for large data processing tasks. We need more compute power. In such type of cases, we can go for the SSIS packages using the SSIS. Using the Azure integration runtime means, as I mentioned, right, Azure integration runtime we will use within the SSIS integration runtime. So the main use case here is to execute the large data processing task with the help of scalable cluster. Next, so the answer C is correct here also. Next, so which type of integration runtime is managed by Microsoft with patching, scaling, maintenance of underlying infrastructure handled for you? Is Azure integration runtime is maintained by them. What type of networks can the self-hosted integration runtime access? Only public network, only private network, both public and private network, none of the above. So both public and private networks. So option C is correct. What is the key advantage of Azure SSIS integration runtime in terms of maintenance? You need to address all patching. Microsoft handles patching. Scaling is automated, but patching maintenance are your responsibility. Scaling maintenance are both automated, but patching is your responsibility. So what is the correct answer? So all Microsoft handles patching, scaling, maintenance. The answer B is correct. Everything will be maintained by Microsoft. Which type of integration runtime allows you to natively execute SSIS packages? SSIS packages, you know, SSIS integration runtime is basically help you to execute the SSIS integration runtime. Okay, so the answer C is correct. Okay. That's all, team. Thanks for watching this particular video. I request all of you to put your questions in the comment section. If you have any questions, I'll answer all of your questions. I request all of you to subscribe my YouTube channel to get more videos, team. Thank you all. That's all for today.